Hi, I'm LadyJenevia. Welcome to my final review of Dickinson Season 2. Before we jump into this episode, I want to thank all of the Dickinson fans that have been tuning in to my reviews week after week. It's been a while since I felt such a strong presence consistently tuning into my videos. My channel is small, people are not checking for me like that, but they might be after I post my new video essay that I've been working on for the last couple of months. I'm really excited to finish that. Hopefully some of you will stick around to watch it. I know that Dickinson has been renewed for a season 3. I don't know when they will make it or air it, but for now, I think I'll probably do reviews of it whenever it does air, especially if they end up sticking to a weekly airing schedule. If they drop it all in one go, it doesn't really lend itself to fleshing out the material the way I've been doing over the last few weeks. Anyway, let's get into episode 10, but also the entire second season as a whole. I know who all of you want me to talk about the most, which is why I'm going to talk about them last. Just bear with me. Starting things off with the end of Lavinia and Ship. Ship tells Lavinia that he's going to move them to New Orleans. She doesn't want to go. Ultimately, they were too different as people to make their relationship work long term. But what I love about this is that it shows how to end a relationship in a healthy way. I don't know if anyone else has drawn this parallel, and you probably couldn't do that until now because you didn't know how this relationship was going to end, but Lavinia and Ship are showing you what Austin and Sue should have done. Despite how much Lavinia and Ship enjoy being together and playing all their salacious little games, they're not compatible to make it work long term because they want very different things. Lavinia wants to be independent and progressive by the standards of the 1800s, and Ship wants a traditional domestic housewife. That is a very similar dynamic to Austin wanting children and Sue not wanting children, but they got married anyway, and well, we see how well that worked out for the two of them. I know that a lot of people were irritated when Ship first came onto the show and would say the things that he was saying, but Lavinia and Ship were honestly one of my favorite duos of this entire season because guess what? I'm sad, and I want that Flow Rida good feeling. Lavinia and Ship made me laugh all season with their shenanigans. I haven't done a deep dive into the creative development of this season, but if I were the type to bet, I would bet money that the writers were having the time of their lives writing these two. Jumping over to Austin, I am so proud of him, and maybe that's a bit weird to say because he's a fictional character, but whatever, let me feel my feelings because I am so proud of his character growth. I said it from the beginning of me posting reviews about Dickinson Season 2, and I fully felt the skepticism of the fans who were going, who the hell is this person, and why is she hyping up Austin and having a go at Sue when I love Sue with every fiber of my being? I think by now, a lot of you have figured out that I was right. Austin did, in fact, have character development. He helped Henry, and in an extended way, he helped John Brown with the larger abolition movement. He was so supportive of Emily. Yes, I'm talking about episode 8. And he took in these troubled children, Clara and Anna, when no one else wanted to. They're not particularly developed as characters, but if you really think about it, they are vulnerable children that are orphaned and living with strangers now. Of course they're going to act out. Even children who haven't been orphaned or majorly traumatized by some other thing in their lives are going to get rebellious at one point or another. That brings us to what happened in this season finale. They burned the church down because they were playing with matches. Here's what you need to know about that. Go back to episode 2 when they were first brought home to the Dickinson residence. What did the older of the two say? Where's our bed? It better be comfortable or I'm gonna set it on fire. Then in episode 4 of this season, when the Dickinson parents are looking at the giant hole that the girls dug up in the yard, Mrs. Dickinson says, "Those girls are out of control. They'll burn our house down if we let them." Do you know how difficult it was to review this show week after week and bite my tongue from pointing out all of the foreshadowing that this show has been doing the entire season? It starts all the way back in episode 1, by the way, but don't worry, we will get to that and more than once in this review. I love that Austin reassured the girls that he still loves them, and if we put that into contemporary settings, it's far too common that kids will get put into the system, and if they're even slightly difficult, then they just keep getting shuffled around from home to home. Did they do something bad? Yes, but ultimately they need to know that they have at least one parental figure in their life that has their back and isn't going to abandon them when things get tough, because presumably they're already feeling abandoned because their parents died. Lavinia and Austin really had the best glow-ups of this season compared to how they were in season 1. It was wonderful to see Austin come into his own as a nurturing caregiver and as a leader in his community, particularly at the end when he was opening up his giant home to everyone after the church fire so that they could gather, support one another, and he was able to inspire them so that they know that all of them can rebuild if they work together. When preparing to make this review, I tweeted out asking what people wanted me to address in this video. It could be anything from across the entire second season, and one of the things that was brought up was nobody. Some people seem to still have questions about the purpose of nobody in this story. This feels like something that could be discussed at length in its own video, like many of the larger plot points and themes of this season, but I'm going to try to condense the few things I have to say about this particular subplot and how it played out in the season finale. The first thing is about how nobody ended up being Fraser, and all season it's been foreshadowed about what is going to happen to Fraser. They say in this episode that Fraser is going to die in the war, seeking glory, seeking fame. That to me read like a blink and you'll miss it moment of socio-political commentary about the military-industrial complex that runs rampant in the States. It's a very small line on the show, but I feel like I should explain it a little bit since I've noticed that some of the people who watch my Dickinson reviews seem to be from countries in Europe or South America, so I don't assume that you will automatically know about all of the messy baggage of what goes on in the States. So, the military in the States has an obscenely inflated budget, far too big to be reasonable by any standard. The government gives all of this money to the military and a sort of police state instead of things like healthcare, childcare, social welfare, education. So what happens when young kids who come from low-income areas want to go to university but cannot afford the tuition? Military recruiters specifically target low-income areas and bribe them with offers of, we'll pay for your tuition if you survive, but I don't really want to get too deep into all of this because I'm not trying to have a bunch of scary pro-military people with guns yelling at me. You don't want to listen to an anti-imperialist talk about a sapphic television show? Then no one's making you. Goodbye. Another line that stood out to me when nobody was talking to Emily in this episode was when he told her, you must be a nobody. This was something that to me read like advice to Emily to not seek fame, but it could also be interpreted as a way of saying that Emily will not achieve that level of fame in her lifetime. I'm no historian, but my understanding is that Emily Dickinson did not reach this level of fame that she now has until after she died. There are a lot of things that have happened on this season that I have felt more strongly about interpreting and analyzing, but the whole nobody subplot is the one that I don't like to be as heavy-handed with when I'm trying to analyze it. I think it's the material on the show that is the most open to varied interpretations. I think it's the most abstract of anything they've introduced so far. So none of what you'll hear me saying about nobody in this review is something where I'm going, this absolutely means this, and I have spoken. End of discussion. To go even further with that point, Mr. Dickinson told Mrs. Dickinson while they were at Austin's place, I dreamed this last night. I saw this happen. The church burning down. I had a vision. It came to me. I've seen this all before. I dreamed about it last night, and it's real. Mrs. Dickinson says to him, "You sound as crazy as Emily," to which Mr. Dickinson replies, "Maybe she's not as crazy as we thought." Let's just pause, rewind, and think about this. Emily had a seance this season, and this show hasn't been really supernaturally oriented before this, apart from the visits with death. Now she's having visions of a man who turns out to be her brother's childhood friend, and she's able to figure out that he's going to die in the Civil War, which is a war that hasn't even started yet when she first starts getting hints that he's going to die in a war. Mr. Dickinson reveals in episode 10 that he also had a vision of something happening before it happened, which was the church burning down. And if you rewind back to episode 4, there is a point where he says to Emily, "I never had a vision like yours." Are these two clairvoyant? That's not a rhetorical question. I don't know the answer. This feels like something that's being set up for further development in season 3, because a lot of the other arcs that we've seen play out over the course of this season were able to have some kind of revolution by the time we hit the season finale. But with this, it feels like we're at the beginning of something. That's another reason why I'm not being as heavy-handed in trying to speculate or discuss the nobody subplot. It really feels like we're only scratching the surface. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I guess either way, we will all find out whenever season 3 comes. Next point of discussion, Sam. I know they really put you through it with him this season. I was already primed to not like Sam because of who's playing him. Don't ask me to explain the Iron Fist racism debacle again. I'm tired and Google is free. But the writing really played around with the viewers. So you're suspicious of him and you think, no, I don't like him. And then you go, oh shoot, my bad, I was too hasty in my judgment. And then they bring it all crashing down to let you know that Sam does in fact suck. He's trash. But as much as we all don't like him, you have to appreciate how well the writers did in spinning his material across the season, instead of just making him another predictable period piece sexist. By the end, when they peel back the layers so you start to see who he really is, I think it's a much more interesting take on the dynamic of how so many women have to rely on men in positions of power to be able to get their art out there. These men are the gatekeepers of show business. Not all of them are these grotesque Jabba the Hutt, Harvey Weinstein types. Some of them are much better at putting on a facade of advocating for and championing women. I don't know how many of you Dickinson stans that watch my reviews week after week have followed this recent development in show business, especially those of you that are Gen Z kids, but a big name in Hollywood, Joss Whedon, was recently exposed on a much larger scale than he ever had before this for being super toxic, abusive, and misogynistic, among other things. And this is something that has been brewing for years, but recently it all exploded. And what you have to know, if you don't already, is that he was someone that a lot of commentators of pop culture and entertainment fiction would revere as a feminist, and he himself would really try to posture and do this sort of performative feminism that had no real substance to it, if you actually looked at it more closely. All the while, he was doing so much damage to a lot of the people he worked with, especially women, to the point that those people are now coming forward and saying that they've had to be in therapy for years just to work through and process everything he subjected them to. And part of me feels bad talking about this because it's deeply unpleasant, but I also think that it's worth discussing because if all of you can become a little bit more aware that this is a threat that exists in the world, then maybe it'll help you to be better at spotting it if it arises in your own life. Anyway, back to the show. The first time I watched this scene play out, when they showed Maggie in the hallway, I knew she was going to snatch up those poems, because right before that, Sam said out loud that Emily's poems were in his satchel. And the way good writing works is that you don't put something in for no reason. If Sam is mentioning that the poems are in his satchel, it's because we need to know that. So then when I saw Maggie in the hallway eavesdropping on the fight in which Emily is demanding that she get her poems back and Sam is saying no, the same argument in which he told her and us where the poems are, I knew Maggie was about to save the day. But here's the part that I have been waiting all season to shout about at all of you. Go back and watch episode 1 when Emily is up in her room writing poems. She is startled by Maggie being in her room, putting clothes away. Emily says, "Hi Maggie, I didn't even know you were in here." And Maggie responds, "A good maid knows how to be invisible." Jump back to episode 10 when Emily is distraught because she thinks that she has lost everything, and Maggie surprises her with the poems she stole back from Sam's satchel. What does Maggie say? "A good maid knows how to be invisible." Did I or did I not tell all of you to pay attention when watching the premiere, because there were things that were going to come back? This brings us to Sue and Emily. Where to begin? I actually thought that when it came time to write a spoiler review for the last episode that I was going to have to go through so much material for these two and explain things. And I did have multiple accounts tweeting me, asking me to explain things about Sue's motivation and her arc across this season in this review. But the thing is, once I actually rewatched this episode in order to take notes that I would use to make this review, and I was transcribing a lot of what Sue said in her big dramatic speech, she explained her season 2 arc. I don't really have to. Did I or did I not tell you that the library scene in episode 1 was very important? I could have sworn I did. Maybe I forgot to write it down. I don't know. But that library scene explained Sue's entire arc that was going to happen this season before it even happened. She told Emily she couldn't handle all of the feelings that Emily's poems provoked in her. She said she was struggling with having experienced a miscarriage. And we also learned that she isn't talking with anyone about it, including Austin. And she said something along the lines of, "I can't be the only one that reads your poems anymore." And not long after she says that in their conversation, she then says something along the lines of, "And that's why you need to meet Sam Bowles." Again, these are not direct quotes, but that's more or less what was being communicated between the two of them in that scene. So Sue, in her big season finale speech, echoes a lot of those same sentiments, but in more detail. She is less restrained now in expressing her feelings for Emily, obviously, and she maps out that same trajectory that was already stated in episode 1. She couldn't deal with all of those feelings and emotions, so she slept with Sam to try to not feel anything. Ouch. Guess his skills weren't up to par. Maybe you just need to work on your technique, Sam. Perhaps someday you will finally learn how to please a woman. Stranger things have happened. I want to vent, or maybe vent is too strong a word, but I want to just air out some things. Have a bit of an I told you so moment, which I think I've more than earned by this point. I have been bombarded for weeks in my comments and on Twitter by fans who have been wanting me to spoil things about what was going to happen in episodes that hadn't aired yet. The season finale in particular was a point of high demand. Imagine if I had been that inconsiderate that I had actually answered those questions with the answers that people seemingly wanted to give. Imagine if I had completely ruined the journey preemptively of reaching this point, this climactic buildup to Sue confessing her love for Emily, Emily grabbing her by the neck, and then those two banging all over the Dickinson residence. That would have made me the worst. Now, I am not bringing any of this up just to scold all of you for being curious about how the season was going to end. I'm more so doing this to vent my own frustrations with how flippant a lot of big name outlets tend to be about how they cover art. It feels like a lot of times they have no problem spoiling things early, and I'm not just focusing on Dickinson here. This is something that happens all the time with almost any content you can think of. If I was that inconsiderate, I can all but guarantee I would lose my press access to this show and all the other Apple TV shows. I would probably end up on a blacklist and do irreparable damage to what I'm trying to build here on my channel. Now, again, you're not wrong for being curious. I'm just so very tired of the past toxic incidents that have accumulated where industry people think they can push me around and bully me because I'm small media. I work really hard at what I do, and I've removed myself from the most toxic scene that I used to subject myself to. And if any of you are struggling with anything even remotely similar to that, I advise you to remove yourself as best as you can from whatever toxicity you find yourself in. It's not worth it. Anyway, now that rant is over, with the Dickinson fandom though, it was a little bit alarming to me how bad things got after episode 8 aired. Now, I knew there was going to be a dramatic reaction because it was a huge dramatic revelation, but what I was not expecting was for the meltdowns to get so bad that there were multiple people saying that they didn't want to watch the show anymore. I don't know how many of those people were just being hyperbolic because it's Twitter and Twitter is the place for hyperbole, but it did seem like at least some of these people were more forthcoming in venting their frustrations, and they really did seem to be slating this season, which I don't agree with. I did my best to just repeatedly tell people in my comments and on Twitter to just finish the season, because once you see all of the season and you go back and watch everything with the knowledge of the full context of all 10 episodes, I don't think this season is anti-Emmy Sue the way some people seemed to act like it was. Emily and Sue's feelings for each other are always woven into the story, even when you don't realize it because you don't know how it's going to end. But I would also make the point that I don't think a story that is only dependent on one romantic coupling makes for particularly interesting fiction. I'm not speaking for everyone, I'm just giving my opinion, so don't yell at me like I'm saying you can't feel how you feel. You can feel however you want to feel, I'm just giving my opinion. There are so many interesting dimensions to the show's writing and the ensemble of characters, including but not limited to Emily and Sue. I understand that LGBT plus representation is very lacking in entertainment media, and that if you are really desperate to see more couplings between women, you're probably wary from a lot of badly handled woman-woman pairings in other works of fiction, a lot of the bury your gays trope, a lot of other ways of mishandling representation that at this point, you are used to lacking quality and quantity representation. But what I would encourage more of you to do is appreciate that your queer leads should not only exist to fulfill a ship. They should be three-dimensional characters and be part of a story that is rich and interesting beyond just a romance. I'm not saying this to be cynical. I love a good ship as much as the next person, but if the writing has nothing else going for it but a ship, I'm probably going to get restless and irritated at the creative team making the thing because they're not giving me enough material. So, for example, I'm Japanese. I do not get to see a lot of quality Asian characters, let alone ones that are specifically Japanese, because contrary to what Hollywood thinks, Asians are not a monolith. This is one of many reasons why one of my favorite shows on television right now is The Boys. There is a Japanese lead character, and yes, she's got a love interest. He's French, and they are ridiculously cute together, and I love every single scene they've ever had together. But also, they have their own individual character journeys outside of just whether or not they're getting together. She has lost her voice because she saw her parents get murdered when she was a child, and then she was forced to become a soldier for the people that murdered her parents, and then she was experimented on with an illegal substance that gave her superpowers, and then he was kidnapped and held captive by his abusive father as a child. So now he has a substance abuse problem, and he also got coerced into working with the CIA to try to protect his criminal friends, and he's trying to find redemption for a lot of the bad things that he's done in his life. I know I'm getting very long-winded, when do I not? But the point is that they both have a lot going on. They have things they need to work through within themselves, but that's what makes them so great as characters. They don't just exist in my mind rent-free as a Japanese romantic lead and her love interest. Dickinson is a very different show from The Boys, but season 2 of Dickinson has some very broad similarities to The Boys, which is that there is a ton of interesting socio-political commentary and really interesting themes that you can dig really deep into analyzing. And that's a gift. Maybe some of you were just lashing out because you were worried that Dickinson was going to follow in the same footsteps of so many other mishandled queer stories. And you don't know me well enough to know that if I smell that kind of tomfoolery coming, I would have called it out. But I sincerely hope that now that you have all of the season 2 episodes to go back and rewatch over and over again, that those of you who didn't already appreciate all those other dimensions of this season's writing will be able to do so now. You can unclench for the time being about whether or not Emily and Sue love each other and whether or not they're going to tell each other that they love each other. Where they will go next, I don't know. If this was just any show, I would say, well, of course they're going to be together. They clearly established that. But the one thing that makes me stop and wonder what comes next is it is loosely based on real historical figures. Sue was married to Austin and they had children together, so your guess is as good as mine for the time being. I don't know how true to history the people in charge of this show want to keep it, but those are worries for another day. For now, just enjoy the season because it's really, really good, and not just because Emily and Sue got together at the end of it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Emily and Sue, nothing too deep. But first, I did want to circle back to when Emily was confronting Sam and she was refusing to look at him. That was a very nice touch because they've been building up to this from the very beginning of this season. Emily was struggling with her eyesight, and the eye doctor gave her advice that isn't just literal medical advice, but symbolic, thematic advice relevant to the themes of the season to do with Emily and fame, and Sam in many ways representing fame. Emily tells him, "I'm protecting my eyes. My eyes are very sensitive, and I'm afraid that if I look at you, I'll go blind." That is a line that relates back to episode 4 when Emily is being compared to a daisy and Sam is being compared to the sun. You don't want to look directly at the sun. It's bad for your eyes. If you really want to reach, you could also compare this idea of Sam representing fame and Emily being advised not to pursue fame because it's dangerous or bad for her, and Sam also representing the sun. All of this can relate to the story of Icarus flying too close to the sun. I know it's a reach, but I'm just bringing it up because it came to mind while I was analyzing the material, so you can just take it or leave it. Now, back to Emily and Sue. By the time you're watching this, I'm probably cackling, scrolling through Twitter, watching the meltdowns ensue. Did any of you see the Baby Yoda gif that I tweeted a couple of days ago? Yeah. I felt like if all of these big print media can be so blatant in giving things away, I could just this once post something that isn't a spoiler, but when you look back on it, it's a lot funnier with the full context. There's no denying that. When Emily and Sue were considerably less dressed and they were feeding each other, the only thing I could think in that scene was, why is their hair so neat? Aren't you two supposed to be in the middle of messing around? How is your hair staying in place like that? You are setting unrealistic expectations to the youths watching this. that are going to get self-conscious if and when they get into shenanigans with whomever their partner might be and their hair doesn't stay perfectly neat and styled? Yeah. I'm that type of viewer, where if you put the camera too close to an actor's face, I'm going to start listing in my head all of the makeup that I can see them wearing, even if it doesn't really make sense in that scene for them to be wearing makeup. Why is Mama Dickinson wearing so much eyeshadow at the spa? If I'm going to a spa and getting a bunch of treatments done, I'm not going to be wearing anything on my face. I'm not even putting my fake eyebrows on. These are not real. These are lies that I paint on my face. Don't yell at me like I'm being too harsh. I understand that film is a visual medium, so you're going to zhuzh people up a bit when they're going to appear on camera. I'm just saying, if I'm sharing my thoughts and I don't have to bother filtering much anymore because it's my last Dickinson video for I don't know how long, there's an insight into how my brain works. I always nitpick details. I can't help it. Like in 10 Things I Hate About You, when the marching band is accompanying Patrick, their marching technique is completely wrong. People are holding instruments wrong. And they do a close-up on the cymbal player right when you hear the cymbal, but the actor doesn't even hit the cymbals together. Ooh, it bothers me. But that also doesn't change the fact that 10 Things I Hate About You is one of my favorite films of all time. Respect the superior teen film. Finally, I find it very interesting how when Emily is telling Sue at the end of the episode that all she needs is her, all she needs is to make Sue feel that way with her writing. On the one hand, I like that it's another full circle moment from the first episode. That's more or less the same thing Emily was trying to tell Sue in the library before Sue pushed her away and created 90% of the drama that all of you were so upset about this season. Go ahead and really think about it. Sue couldn't deal with her feelings in a healthy way, so she dragged Sam into Emily's life, pushed Emily to give up her poems and pursue fame, and completely threw off Emily's flow and vibes. I have ended friendships for less than that. What I didn't like, though, is that sentiment. I really don't like that all you need is love garbage. It's rich people nonsense. Arguably, I would say that it's rich people propaganda. Because if rich people can brainwash you into thinking that all you need is love, then you're not going to rise up and drag them out of their mansions to try to get them to stop scamming the masses by hoarding their wealth and not paying their taxes. Eat the rich. I don't even know where I am anymore with this review. I know I'm all over the place. I don't know if there's anything else you want my opinions or commentary on about this episode or this show, but if you leave it in the comments, I can try to respond unless for some reason I get too many comments that I don't know how to keep up with all of them. So at this point, do I ship Emmy Sue? I don't know, really. I don't find it as appealing after this season because of my very specific life experiences that have led me to the point where I really, really don't like when people lie, manipulate, and gaslight people that are supposed to be their loved ones. It's a real sore spot for me. But they've given you the full context of why Sue did what she did, which is good. And I stand by what I have said repeatedly over the course of reviewing this season, that women do not have to be likable. And it's not fair to hold women to these ridiculous standards when male characters in fiction can be full-on trash and be revered figures in pop culture for decades. Yes, I am talking about Danny Zuko again. He is garbage. However, I have zero problems with anyone being an Emmy Sue shipper, an Emmy Sue stan, being invested in that relationship, because at the end of the day, it's fiction, and great fiction can take you on this emotional whirlwind and move and inspire you, and I think that's great. The world is on fire. Emmy Sue as a ship is not hurting anyone unless any of you watch that and think that that's how someone should be able to treat you in your real life. No, I strongly advise against that, but I already explained that in I don't remember which review it was. I'm pretty sure it was episode 8, but there we have it. Thank you so much again to everyone for tuning in. If you don't end up sticking around for the other reviews that I'll be posting on my channel just about other things, thanks for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Maybe we will see one another again down the line, and if you do want to stick around, I am very, very excited to share that I have made a ton of progress in editing my new video essay. This is one that I've been working on for months. I'm really excited about it and I cannot wait for people to watch it. Don't forget to like and comment, since that helps out small content creators like myself to get more help from YouTube's algorithms. Lord knows they don't want to help me right now. It helps my content to get recommended more to new viewers that don't already know who I am. Feel free to also follow my social media accounts. Everything is in the description box, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.